Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to join me today. My name is Rudy and I'm a Director for B2B Research here at YouGov. And in this webinar, I'm going to talk to you about how to maximize or get maximum value from your B2B projects. We've got a fair bit to cover, so I'll crack on. But just to go over some housekeeping as such, if anyone has any questions as we go along, then please do submit these via the chat box. I'll keep an eye out for these and look to answer them. There'll also be some time at the end to submit any questions you have. So if you'd like to wait till then please do feel free to do so. Cool, so good stuff. So just before I go into more detail about running B2B projects, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on YouGov. We are a data and analytics company focused on collecting consumer and opinion and behavioral data across the globe. So we have a strong record for data accuracy and online research innovation, and every day we engage with millions of consumers around the world, collecting information on numerous industry sectors, categories, and brands. Our connected data encompasses hundreds of thousands of variables and over a decade of data that we've built on our panel members. It's this combination of panel members, variables, and time that enables us to provide great depth and richness in our audiences, and also helping our clients with their research needs. One of which being business audiences, which is obviously what I'll be covering today. As well as having the best panel data and tools, we're also the most quoted research source in the UK and among the top 2 or 3 in Italy, Singapore, and Germany. So our brand has really been built up since coming into existence 20 years ago. On this slide, it's just to show you our full range of products that we can offer our clients, which is predominantly underpinned by great technology that integrates all our data streams. We supply solutions ranging from syndicated to custom approaches, and it's all integrated into one platform, which we call the Cube. The Cube is where we store all our data that we collect on all our panelists, and it's then readily available to be accessed by industry best analytic and visualization tools. By having so many panelists signed up to our panel to take our surveys is what ultimately enables us to offer such a vast array of products and solutions for our clients. And as I mentioned, you'll see a few of those here. But just bringing the focus back to B2B, what are we going to cover today? Well, we'll be talking briefly about why it's important to get your research right and how this can be accomplished, both from yours and the market research agency's perspective. And I'll be going into a bit more detail about what the agency should be asking you to help make the project smooth and get the data that you're looking for in order to either publish for PR purposes or even for internal purposes with stakeholders. I'm going to talk about tips for designing B2B projects, and this is what the main bulk of the webinar will be about today. So take into account what things to consider and look out for when putting your projects together, and how this differs from consumer research. Of course, when clients send us draft questionnaires, we don't expect them to be the finished article by any means, but hopefully these tips will help everyone take considerations into account when they're putting it together and you're brainstorming ideas internally before you decide to send it out to your research agency. I'll also share some successful case studies so you can see what happens when we do get the research projects right. And lastly, I'll just outline some of the B2B solutions we have at YouGov, which may fit with your potential B2B projects. So firstly, getting it right, and I suppose why are we doing this? Well, we understand how important running research projects are for our clients, and we want to make sure that they get the most out of their data. Too often, companies are not getting as much from the data as they should, and this is usually because the provider hasn't done enough to understand their objectives and end goals. So we know by helping our clients get the maximum out of their research helps them, both in terms of their brand and within their industry space. Of course, it does help YouGov, but to be honest, for the most important thing from our perspective is ensuring we build great relationships with our clients and that they get the best experience in working with us. And by combining all these components together, it just makes all parts of the project run more smoothly. So what to include when coming to a research agency? Well, clients, understandably, tend to sometimes only send the questionnaires over. This can be fine if the agency you're working with, asks loads of questions and digs a bit deeper into why you're looking to run the research. But if on the other hand, the agency just takes that questionnaire literally as it is and looks to run the project, then there really is a high chance that the results you get back won't be what you wanted, or you won't be able to use the data as you would have liked. So it might mean no coverage if it's for PR purposes, or you're having to disappoint stakeholders if it's more for internal use. And obviously it costs clients capital because they've lost their investment on the project because it's not done what they wanted, because they haven't got any traction from it, or they've having to spend money again to run the research again, which is really the worst case scenario. So as I say, sending the questionnaires, depending on the agency you're working with, can lead to all sorts of issues. So the best thing to do would be to send it with the objectives you're after as well, because this allows the market research agency to see exactly what you're looking to gain from the survey, and they should be able to advise accordingly on how best to design the questionnaire in order to help you get the results you're after. This also gives companies confidence that we are trying to engage and understand their objectives. And I think that's the most important thing a research agency can do, is to work with the clients to understand exactly what they're looking to do, because that will help them to work with the client and design the questionnaire accordingly to fit with the objectives. So what should a market research agency be asking you? Well, loads of questions, to be honest. But asking the right questions means we're able to understand your objectives. It means we can make the right recommendations for you, so both in terms of morphology and the right products, based on the sample you're after, the frame, the size, what you're looking to do with the data. The more information we collect, the more we can advise on those aspects of the project cycle. We can also look at helping you think of alternative angles, just if for whatever reason the results don't quite come out as you expected. By working closely with you, we can suggest alternative angles that you could look into or look to dissect the results by, to create more use from the data and give more meaning from the research you're doing. And also it enables us to explain the project cycle so you can understand step by step what's required in terms of setup, length of fieldwork, and what deliverables you can expect at the end. And just generally, this just ensures that it leads to a faster and smoother process of running the research, and that there's no surprises at the result stage. So why is getting it so important? Well, it leads to great coverage, to be honest. And here are just some examples of where good B2B research has led to great coverage for our clients. Sometimes it may not be about PRing, and it may be about presenting some internal ideas back to stakeholders, or maybe using the data to make an informed decision about a product release, for example. So taking the steps that I've just gone over, will give clients more confidence about how the research is being conducted. And you can have faith in the reliability and the validity of the research as well when presenting it back, either internally, as I mentioned, to your stakeholders, or if you're going out to journalists and looking to publish stories based on the data. So I'm just going to talk about some tips to consider when designing B2B surveys. So before I go deep into that, one thing to always consider is the challenges around doing a B2B project, because while it has some similarities with consumer research, there are invariably going to be some differences and considerations for B2B projects. So I've listed sort of 5 separate points here, but one of those being the morphology. So that's about, I suppose, thinking about the best way to conduct the research. So depending on the sample you're after, is online okay in terms of targeting those groups, or does it require an offline approach to reach the required sample? Or maybe even doing some qual elements or studies to get the targeted group, because it's a niche business sample. So yeah, these are considerations that we, the market research agency, will take into consideration when talking to you about your projects and the design of the survey and who to target and how best to do that. And obviously, we'll take considerations such as budgets that you have as well when making our recommendations, or when any agency makes the recommendations, I should say. They should always take that into account as well and look how best to maximize the value for your B2B projects. So yeah, so validity of the research is another point to consider. So thinking about the end goal and whether the data will stand up to scrutiny if anyone was to question it. So this is where communication from the market research agency is important, as they can advise on the best approach so that the reliability and validity is upheld. This naturally leads into taking the sample frame and sample size into account. So unlike consumer research, where you can survey thousands and thousands of people, B2B research can have niche groups, and so the agency needs to understand exactly who you're looking to target, who the project relates to, who the ideal audience is, as well as what a realistic sample size for reaching that group is as well, and how you want to report on that data. So, a really number of key elements that needs to be taken into consideration from the agency when they discuss the projects with you, so that they can advise on the best approach. Because again, at the end of the day, it's about helping clients to get as much as possible the results they're after, and help them to distribute the survey accordingly, whether that's amongst journalists for PR purposes or stakeholders, but helping them to get as accurate data as possible from the research. And as I said, I think for B2B projects, these elements all need to be taken into account, probably more than a sort of standard consumer type survey. So just how to approach a good questionnaire design for B2B research. But firstly, as with consumer research, there are some general ground rules to take into consideration when putting a draft questionnaire together, and obviously the research agency as well to think about when they're working with you on the survey. But yeah, just remember, if a colleague says it's unclear, then it is unclear. What we'll cover in a minute is around ambiguity, but yeah, we need respondents to all think along the same lines and have the same clear approach in terms of how we want them to answer the survey. So one of the best things to do is, once a draft question is put together, is to give it to a colleague or a peer and just ask them to review it and just see if they are understanding the survey in the same context, or whether they're understanding it a different way, in which case it's 99 times 100 means the survey needs some form of a redesign in order to capture the data you're after in the most accurate way. YouGov, we are predominantly an online agency, so don't forget our approach is online. It's worth considering what the pros or cons of this, of running B2B research projects, and whether this method works. Again, if it's more niche groups, maybe an offline approach or a qual approach might be a better solution. Keeping it simple, so we have a bit more leeway with business audiences, I would say, compared to consumers, because if you're going to specialize decision makers within certain sectors or industries, then they'll have a general understanding of terms or taglines or abbreviations that are used within the industry. But even so, I would always say to start general and then focus in. So do still keep it clear, to make sure all respondents are thinking along the same lines, and then you can focus in more on particular terminology, or finding out if they've done a particular action, and build the story that way through the survey. And I think another key or important element, I should say, of research design is keeping answer lists as short as possible. I think that's particularly important in today's market research, because a lot more surveys are being conducted over mobile. So if you imagine a mobile screen, whilst I know there are bigger ones out nowadays, there are still some respondents who will have smaller screens. So if the answer options have a lot of text, then it can be it can be long for them to read, which naturally leads to respondent fatigue, which has always been the case anyway with market research. So yeah, just trying to keep the lists as short and concise as possible, I think will definitely lend itself to better research practices. Thinking specifically about B2B research and the target audience. So does it require a particular type of respondent, the project that we're looking to run? In this example, we can see that this is quite a specific topic and might be better asked to an owner if it's an owner of a small business, or HR professionals who will have a better understanding of the policies in place at the business, as opposed to a general workforce who might not know or are not sure on the terminology and whether it's part of private healthcare that businesses provide, for example. So these are all, so this is where it's important to consider who we want to survey in our B2B projects. And that's why, again, it's good to share all the relevant information with your market research agency, because they can then make the recommendations of which product or solution best fits with what you're looking to do. And yeah, sharing objectives and ideal headlines or what you're looking to gain from the research will certainly help with that. And again, it works two ways. The market research agency should be asking you that as well, because at the end of the day, it is vital to target the relevant decision makers, since their feedback is going to be the most valuable and actionable for our clients. So one of the key elements of B2B design, but questionnaire design in general, is avoiding ambiguity. And it's where we need, all respondents to be understanding and thinking in the same way when they answer the survey questions. So just to give a couple of examples here. So where do you bank? In terms of a B2B perspective, are we asking respondents this about their personal banking? Is it about the business? What type of account are we asking about? Is it the business account or is it the personal account? So yeah, so just adding more clarity and context around the question here. This is one of the classics, I would say, when we're asking two questions in one. So here we're asking about the internet providers, rates, and customer service. When we get the data back, we don't know what respondents have answered about. Are they answering about the rates? Have they answered about the customer service? Have they taken an average into mind and just answered generally about the rates and service? So yeah, so this questions in this format definitely harms the validity of the research, and we would always advise splitting this into two questions. And then just one about the Bank of England, whether they'll cut interest rates. So on the face of it, might not seem too bad a question, but again, there's no context given to respondents. We haven't given any background on what the interest rate is currently, for example, and we haven't defined when we are asking about the Bank of England cutting interest rates. So do we want to know if this is by the end of the week? Is it by next month? Is it in the next year, next 5 years, etc., etc.? So without giving it context in that sense, people will answer it in different ways because we haven't given them a time frame. And again, ambiguity does destroy clarity. And if, as I said before, if showing questionnaires to a colleague is a good practice, and if they've understood it in a different way, then we must consider changing it into a format where all respondents are thinking about the survey in the same way. And the advantages of online is that we can use preamble to give it context as well. Here. So sort of related to B2B surveys, and one to take into consideration is whether we're asking about the business or the decision maker. So if I just use an example here, two questions asking about fraud, but one asking from the decision maker's perspective when we're saying you, and one asking from the business perspective where we mention the business specifically. So it's about understanding who are you looking to talk to, or rather whose perspective are you looking to present the results in. So do you want to present the results from a decision maker's perspective, or are you looking to do it from a business perspective? So something fairly, I suppose, simple in the sense that sort of like one or two wording change to reflect the decision maker or the business, but actually quite a key point, because depending on how the questions is asked, is how you'll be able to report the data. And again, that's where the agency needs to clarify and ask all the relevant questions, so that at the end you're not presenting data in a way that you didn't actually want to, because you wanted to talk about the business rather than the decision maker, for example. So another key point is revealing the viewpoints. So as a general rule of thumb, so the position or opinion of the client shouldn't really be evident in the survey. And I'll just give a couple of examples of this. So here we're talking about the current government, and whether enough has been done to ensure a stable economic outlook for businesses. The key term here being mess is already leading respondents and will mean a skew in answers. I know sometimes clients do include terminology like this to help get the results they want, but it doesn't lend itself to good research practices, which again, a question in this format would harm the reliability and validity of the project. And then just again here, the 60% is already leading the respondents, and I would argue not really needed here. I think a better approach would be to define what we mean by money masterclasses, and then ask whether high street banks should provide this for SME businesses. If it was for a press release purpose, for example, then it's absolutely fine to bring the 60% context back into the release and then do the stats around that. But for good research practice design, yeah, it's something that we would advise against including here, because as I mentioned, it will already polarize respondents' opinions and lead them to answer in a particular way, which, yeah, just discredits YouGov and our clients' results if it came under scrutiny. So another approach to keep in mind is to always keep it simple. So in the first instance, try to avoid jargon if you can. So even though we're talking about cloud-based SRM systems, maybe we're going to IT decision makers, CRM systems can actually mean a few different things to different people, because it's got a number of considerable elements to it. So here it'll be good to preamble exactly how we want respondents to consider the CRM system when answering this. And the one that was new for myself, the term tiger team. I've only recently discovered this, but again, so not all respondents that we're going to might be up with the terminology. So just explaining here what a tiger team actually is, so respondents are clear on how we want them to answer the survey. Because if we don't, it can increase the likelihood of them selecting don't know, or just selecting random answers, which again doesn't help with the end results and reporting those. So scale questions is another element to consider, and is almost a skill in itself. The main thing to consider is balance in the scale. So for example, if you're doing a strongly agree to strongly disagree statement, make sure all elements are covered. So the midpoints being tend to agree, tend to disagree, and even a neither agree nor disagree, but that's a balanced scale. Don't mix your scales either. So saying at least daily and every payday, overlapping each other, so respondents won't know which one to select. Considering whether you need to provide scales based on numbers or words or both. Again, that will depend on what you're looking to do with the research. If it's for internal calculations, then normally numbers are applied to the scale. If it's more about PR purposes, then normally just the wording is what we suggest to our clients. And then if needed, do add not applicable options onto the scale if you're going to an audience where it might not apply to some of them when answering the survey. And then just some general points, additional points to consider. So thinking about whether all your options are covered when designing the survey and putting the questionnaire together. Don't be scared of don't knows, embrace it. As has been mentioned before, If we, excuse me, if we're clear to respondents on providing definitions where we need to, or preamble and explaining exactly how we want response to consider terminology or the question, then the percentage for don't knows will be low. Yep, be specific, avoid assumptions, don't assume respondents will know every single terminology that we're putting in the survey or every anagram. And if you need to give context so that respondents can consider a time frame where they can answer accurately. So if you're asking about the last year, for example, respondents are more likely to know about that as opposed to if you're asking them about the 10 years ago. So do bear time frames in mind. So finally, what is good questionnaire design? Where it's all part of the data collection process, which essentially can be fitted into sort of 3 areas where it's the design, the field work, and the results. And good questionnaire is all part of the process and helps to make the wheels go round and ensure a smooth, faster process for our clients and give them more confidence in the results and data they're being given. So just going to go over a couple of successful case studies with clients that we've had. So the first one being Crowdstrike. So Crowdstrike came to us wanting to run a global B2B survey on cybersecurity and position themselves as a thought leader in this space. As cybersecurity has been, is, and will continue to be such a big topic, Crowdstrike wanted to run the project in several markets to not only make cross-country comparisons, but also to sell into local trade media as well. So the survey was predominantly to look at how businesses are operating whilst moving to working from home environments, obviously due to the unfortunate pandemic, and in particular the extent of which cybersecurity is taking place within the workplace. Because moving all offices and businesses to working from home takes a lot of consideration, and cybersecurity being one of those to ensure systems and the company's networks, are all secure from any threats. So we ran the research in 9 markets across US, Europe, and Asia Pac, and the results got Crowdstrike some great trade media in the technology space. So including into local trade, which is one of the objectives they set out. And as such, it enhanced their position and reputation as a thought leader on cybersecurity. So, we worked closely with them on their questions, understanding what they were looking to do, what markets they ideally wanted to run the project in, and you can see it's led to some great coverage from them. And as I said, they are now it's enhanced their position as a thought leader on this topic. And then another case study I just want to share is for Accenture. So theirs was to do a project in support of International Women's Day, which is actually their flagship project that they run every year. And the objective was to understand how attitudes and ranges of workplace diversity issues sort of differed by country and audience type. So the audience type being C-suite level decision makers, as well as employees generally. So C-suite respondents are a really niche sample and notoriously difficult to survey. And on top of that, normally have big cost implications in order to target them. But what we were able to do is offer a really, really competitive price. And due to the power of our panel, we were able to run both samples completely online, which meant a faster turnaround of results for the client. And as a result, Accenture got the coverage they wanted. They were able to continue to establish themselves as the thought leaders in the space. And it also meant they got coverage from a number of different trade press and on a number of websites as outlined here. So both these case studies demonstrate exactly what can happen when we get the research right, and I think they're really great. success stories of what can happen for our clients when we get the project right. Cool. So just lastly, I'm just going to cover a couple of solutions that we offer for our B2B. So our standard B2B omnibus offers 3 different sample sizes. So we can target 500, 1,000 or 2,000 samples of either micro-sized businesses. So these are decision makers or respondents considered to be decision makers in their business of less than 10 employees. We can do small businesses as well, so that's less than 50 employees. Again, targeting decision makers within those businesses, SMEs, and B2B, so B2B being all sizes. So as I said, all these products target decision makers within their businesses. Yeah, and we can get the opinions of those. So it's a mixture of levels going from owners, partners, board director members, C-suite level members, board level members, managing directors. And yeah, we're able to, as you can see, offer some big sample sizes here, with 2,000 being our flagship product. And specifically for omnibus research globally, we can offer 23 different markets. So as you can see, we have offerings across Europe, South America, the US, as well as Asia Pac. So a number of different markets that we can offer. As I say, this is focused on being replicate of the business omnibus that we offer in the UK. So we can offer 250 or 500 samples here. But also, as you saw from the International Women's project, we can actually do more on a targeted approach, and that's where our bespoke B2B solutions come into effect. And just a couple of examples here to highlight the different groups that we were able to target, yeah, through using ad hoc B2B approach. So we're always, as I say, we'll always talk to our clients. We'll always look at the objectives, look at the brief, look at the proposal, and advise our clients on what we feel is the best solution for them. So whether that's we can run it on a product solution, being the B2B omnibus, or whether it needs a bit more of a targeted approach. But either way, I do believe we provide a number of solutions that our clients can use as well. So just lastly, I just thought I would present, I suppose, a couple of results for some internal research that we did, just to get decision makers' perspective on the economic outlook at the moment, obviously with COVID and the pandemic and everything, just to see what their general perspective is. I'm going to show you some results from 3 questions, but there were actually a few more questions that were asked, and as well as getting a link to the PowerPoint presentation and recording of this webinar, which will be shared with everyone. You'll also receive a link to the results so you can see the data in more detail. But just for the webinar's purposes, so we asked a question around job security. Compared to a month ago, how secure do you think your job is? And we can see here that B2B business, so across all sizes, are the least secure about their job, but also the most secure. So I think the main thing to take from this is that in general, most respondents feel there's been no change in their job security over the last month. And just to say, sorry, this went out to 500 decision makers, where we were able to turn around results within 2 to 3 days. We also asked about the economy as well, and what they felt the outlook would be for the UK economy in 12 months' time. So do you think, which one of the points do you think will most likely apply to the UK economy? And we can see that pretty much over 3 and 5 across the board feel we will be in a recession, unfortunately, in 12 months' time. I'm hoping that almost 2 in 5 of those who said it will be booming are correct, or even those that said it will remain stable. but yeah, most respondents that we surveyed don't have a positive outlook for the economy, unfortunately. And then just looking globally, we asked how concerned they were about a global recession happening over the next 12 months. And again, we can see here that, yeah, combining both the concerns, over 9 in 10 respondents across small SMEs and B2B businesses are all concerned that a recession will hit in the next 12 months. So yeah, so the outlook for the UK economy and the global and recession globally is almost an expectation, I suppose, from the decision makers that we surveyed. So, but obviously we'll have to see how it pans out as it's uncertain times still with everything going on. And as I mentioned, when you receive the follow-up email with the link to the results, you can go online and look at the data in more detail. It's broken down by a number of demographics, including industry, company turnover, decision-making responsibilities, and others. So please do go on and have a look at the data when you get a chance. So that's it from me. I hope everyone found the webinar useful. Does anyone have any questions at all? Cool. So got a couple of questions. Got a couple of questions here. So one from Stephanie. What have you found to be the most common research challenges for organizations when conducting B2B research? I suppose because B2B research is such a specialized area of research, the main challenges is around making sure we get the right respondents for our clients, as has been covered in the webinar. You know, that's a very important element to take into consideration when we as a market research agency do B2B projects with our clients. And so, yeah, it's understanding exactly what the client is looking to do, what they're looking to get from the research, how they're going to use the data, what type of insights they're looking for, and just making sure, yeah, that we provide the right solutions for our clients to help them get the data they need. Got one from Peter asking, with target markets being frequently small, what is your top tip for finding the right audience? Yeah, so again, it's about working with the agency and understanding exactly what you're looking to gain from the research, who the right type of respondent is, and we can advise accordingly on feasibility for the groups that we feel would give you the best data back. So again, it's all about the relationship with the market research agency and making sure they are asking all the right questions to get the details they need to provide the best solutions for clients. And then just one from David, how do we get a quote for different types, sizes of research? So if you email the B2B address, which is just on this screen, b2b@yougov.com, that will come through to my team, as I say, who look after B2B research. Yeah, and if you just outline exactly what the type of research you're looking to do, then we'll definitely come back to you and confirm what sort of feasibility we have on our panel and the best approaches for targeting the respondents you're after. So yeah, just to confirm, that's b2b@yougov.com. If you're saying any queries there, then we can help accordingly. So thank you to those three for asking their questions. Does anyone else have any further questions before I wrap up? Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much again, everyone, for taking the time to join the webinar today. As I mentioned, we'll be following up with an email with a link to the PowerPoint presentation, also the recording, and yeah, a link to the results that I went through, which you'll find on the YouGov website, and then yeah, you can have a look at the data there. And as I say, it'll be broken down by a lot more demographics. Yeah, to see how respondents, or how decision makers, I should say, are feeling about COVID and the pandemic and our future prospects. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.